You think summer is all sunshine, beaches, and beautiful memories? Think again. Some summers end with a scream in the night, a pair of eyes behind the curtain, or a photo you never took. In today's video, you'll hear 3 real horror stories told by those who survived them. 3 summers, 3 experiences that forever changed how they see the world. Story 1. The Stranger in Miranda's Room. A lively graduation party ends in eerie silence when someone stays behind, waiting until everyone falls asleep. Story 2. The Watcher in the Woods. What began as a peaceful kayak trip turns into a survival chase when a silent man appears and never takes his eyes off you. And finally, the voice in the dark. In the Montana wilderness, 3 friends hear a hello in the middle of the night. But that voice isn't a cry for help. It's an invitation. No blood, no jump scares, just raw moments when you realize the scariest thing is being sure you're alone. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next terrifying night. And now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, because you're about to enter 3 of the most chilling summer nights ever told. That July night unfolded like any other summer evening, sweltering, heavy, and full of promise. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, Miranda's house had become the epicenter of organized chaos. No parents home, no supervision, just a shimmering pool lit by string lights and over 100 teenagers freshly escaped from adolescence, drifting on the edge of freedom and recklessness. Caleb was one of the first to arrive, along with Jonah, his best friend since elementary school. They were close with Miranda, and among the few who truly understood how she orchestrated a party, everything in order, at least for the first couple of hours. From the kitchen to the living room and spilling out into the backyard, the crowd began to gather around the pool. EDM music thumped from Bluetooth speakers, and floodlights flickered over the water. Some wore bikinis, others didn't bother changing, diving into the pool in soaked underwear. The air was fermented with alcohol and sweat. But then, as the clock struck 11 p.m., the mood began to shift. Miranda frowned at the sight of unfamiliar faces, people she hadn't invited, not classmates, not even friends of classmates, just strangers who pushed through the gate as if they knew the house better than the host herself. "No more people," Miranda typed frantically into the class group chat, her voice broken with frustration. But amid the chaotic music, her band felt like a whisper in a forest. When the police showed up at 1 a.m., thanks to noise complaints from neighbors, the party came to an abrupt end. Red and blue lights swept across the pool, reflecting off empty beer cans and wet footprints on the patio tiles. Most guests scattered as quickly as they had come. In moments, a strange hush fell over the house. Only Miranda, a few close friends, Caleb, Jonah, and Steve, the big guy known for drinking past his limit, remained. They cleaned together in the thinning dark, under the dim yellow glow of the backyard lights. The clatter of empty cans hitting the trash, the crunch of dry grass beneath their feet. Caleb quietly scanned the house, feeling that something very small, very silent was still moving beneath the calm surface, as if something hadn't left, or worse, was still hiding in the shadows, patiently waiting for everyone to grow tired and let their guard down. The house gradually fell into silence. It was close to 3 a.m., and everyone left was beginning to drift from exhaustion and alcohol. Miranda sat on the couch, her hair still wet, arms resting on her knees, eyes lingering on the chaos that had just unfolded. Caleb and Jonah were gathering towels scattered around the pool when a sharp sound came from upstairs. Crack. Everyone froze. It was a small sound, but unmistakable, like a faint splintering of wood, No one spoke for the first few seconds, each trying to rationalize it in their heads. Maybe the house settling, or a strong gust pushing against a window. But Miranda was the first to break the silence. "Did you hear that?" she asked, eyes wide, her voice restrained but edged with panic. Jonah let out a nervous laugh. "Probably Steve. Dude's probably sleepwalking." Miranda shook her head. "Steve's downstairs, and my room's locked." Jonah and Caleb exchanged glances. This wasn't something to joke about anymore. Miranda, usually so composed, was now gripping the armrest tightly. She looked at Caleb. "Go check for me, please." The two friends quietly crept up the stairs, their steps soft as a cat's. The house suddenly felt smaller, every sound echoing too loudly. They opened Miranda's bedroom door, empty. Nothing seemed out of place. Sheets were smooth, windows shut, bedside lamp still on. "No one's here," Jonah whispered. "You must have imagined it." Caleb wasn't convinced. Something still didn't feel right. He gestured toward the next room, the guest room, formerly Miranda's brother's. The door was unlocked. As they opened it, both boys stopped. Steve was lying on the bed, limbs sprawled, mouth open, snoring like a chainsaw, deeply asleep. "So that's where he ended up," Jonah murmured. "Must have stumbled up here earlier without anyone noticing." Caleb didn't respond. A chill rippled down his spine. If Steve had been out cold like that, then who or what had made that sound? They returned downstairs to tell Miranda. She exhaled in relief, trying to convince herself it was just her tired mind playing tricks. After a few teasing remarks, everyone settled into their sleeping spots. Miranda and her best friend Mel in her room, Jonah on the couch, Caleb in her parents' bed, too exhausted to drive home. The house fell silent again, lights off. Only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the gentle whir of the ceiling fan remained. But Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. That strange feeling still lingered, the sense of being watched, from somewhere, by someone. He didn't know where it was coming from. He didn't know who it was, only that it was still there, somewhere in the house, waiting. Caleb didn't know when he had drifted off, but he was jolted awake by a sound, not loud, not clear, but sharp enough to punch his heart into overdrive inside his chest. A scream. A piercing scream tore through the night, coming from Miranda's room, followed by the panicked cries of two girls. Caleb shot upright, drenched in cold sweat even though the air conditioner was still humming steadily. He bolted from the bed, bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Jonah had sprung from the couch too, face pale. "What the hell?" Caleb didn't wait for an answer. He ran to Miranda's room. Just as his hand touched the doorknob, the door burst open, nearly hitting him in the face. Mel was the first to burst out, screaming in sheer terror. Miranda followed close behind, nearly pushed forward by the force of her horror. Both girls were trembling, their eyes wide with panic, staring into the darkness behind them. "There's someone in the room!" Miranda screamed, her voice cracking and catching in her throat. Caleb didn't think. He shoved the door open and stepped inside. The room was pitch dark. The bedside lamp had been turned off. Dim light from the hallway cast warped shadows across the walls. And then he saw him. In the corner of the room, opposite the bed, beyond the armchair, a man was standing. Tall, thin, completely still. Not moving, not speaking, but his eyes. Those eyes cut through the darkness, locking straight onto Caleb. Caleb's heart clenched. Part of him wanted to scream, to run. But he stood frozen, rooted to the spot. The man didn't look afraid. On the contrary, He was unnervingly calm, as if watching, studying his reaction. "Who are you?" Caleb demanded, voice trembling. No response. From behind, Jonah stormed in, but just as they braced to confront the intruder, the figure suddenly twisted and bolted. In an instant, he dashed through the rear door of the bedroom, disappearing into the dark hallway. "Chase him!" Caleb shouted, but his legs felt anchored to the floor. Footsteps echoed from the lower level. A door slammed open. Steve had woken up too, stumbling onto the staircase, dazed. Miranda and Mel were already outside, screaming into the night for the police. It all happened so fast, like a nightmare that sucked the air straight from your lungs. When the police arrived, they searched the entire house. No sign of anyone, no clear evidence of forced entry, no muddy footprints, no broken locks. But everyone knew he had been there. "Maybe he slipped in while the party was packed," one officer suggested. "Waited until you were all too tired to notice." Caleb just nodded, but inside, something was clear, more than anything. That man's eyes, they weren't the eyes of a stranger who wandered in by mistake. They were the eyes of someone who had been waiting for a long, long time. 3 days after that night, Miranda's house still bore the traces of panic. Beer cans left uncleaned, a single flip-flop overturned in the entryway, and a faint handprint on the glass of the back door, the only trace the police kept, though they said nothing conclusive could be analyzed. Miranda moved in temporarily with her grandmother. Mel skipped her entire summer vacation to stay with her sister in another state. Steve refused to talk about what happened, only repeating, "I don't know. I didn't hear anything." Caleb and Jonah, despite trying to act normal, had trouble sleeping every night. Something from that night still clung to them. Not a shadow, but a sensation. An invisible void, as if someone always lingered on the edge of their vision, disappearing the moment they turned their heads. A week later, Miranda called Caleb. "He knew my name," she whispered over the phone. Caleb stayed silent. "I remember now. When he was in the room, he wasn't just staring at me. He whispered, almost inaudibly. But I heard it. My name. That can't be a coincidence, right?" Caleb didn't know what to say. His hand gripped the phone tightly. The room around him felt a little colder. "Do you think he's been here before?" she asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered. But at that moment, somewhere in Caleb's mind, the images of that chaotic night resurfaced. Unfamiliar faces, the unlocked back door, eyes from the darkness. No one knew who he was. No one was sure he had ever truly left. And from that day forward, Caleb began locking every door, every night. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he still felt it. Someone standing just outside the window, waiting. Ryan was the introverted type, someone who found peace in places rarely visited by others. Every weekend, while others gathered at bars or family BBQs, he strapped his kayak to the roof of his car, packed a bottle of water, a few protein bars, and drove nearly an hour to a secluded stream. There was no cell service there, no traffic noise, only bird song, wind whispering through leaves, and crystal clear water flowing quietly beneath a canopy of dense trees. Ryan loved the spot for one reason only. No one else knew about it. But that weekend was different. Just as he parked in the familiar clearing by the trailhead, a beat-up silver sedan turned into the lot. The man inside, middle-aged, wearing a wrinkled denim shirt, glanced at him through the windshield before stepping out, stretching like he was claiming the space. Ryan gave a polite nod and began tying down the kayak, not interested in conversation. But the man approached, stopping right by the water's edge. "Beautiful day, huh?" he said, with a smile that didn't reach his lips. "Yeah," Ryan replied. "Nice and quiet." The man asked where he was from. Ryan lied, saying he was just a tourist passing through. Something instinctive warned him not to admit he was local. After a few awkward exchanges, Ryan paddled off. He assumed the odd encounter was just a coincidence. But 20 minutes later, he heard a noise, the soft snap of a branch from the shore. Turning his head through the trees, he saw the man again, standing between two oaks, half concealed by the trunk, as if watching him. Ryan didn't scream, didn't call out. He just kept paddling, heart pounding. That day, the water seemed stiller than usual, and the forest, silent to the point of suffocation. Ryan didn't look back again, but he knew the man was still there. Every paddle stroke matched the beat of his heart. This was no longer a peaceful escape. The water no longer seemed crystal clear. It was murky with suspicion. The air felt stripped from the forest, leaving behind a silence stretched taut like a drumhead. He paddled deeper into the woods. The stream narrowed, tree roots from both banks intertwining like claws gripping the water's surface. But no matter how far he went, whenever he paused his strokes, he heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps on decaying leaves from the shore. Ryan fought to stay calm. He couldn't call for help, no signal, no passers-by. And if he screamed, no one but that man would hear. He pulled out his phone, opened the camera as an excuse, and discreetly filmed the shoreline. Nothing there. But Ryan could still feel those eyes on him, patient and silent, like a snake waiting to strike. He couldn't go on like this. Taking a deep breath, Ryan turned the kayak around, pointing the bow upstream, back toward where his car was parked. Every stroke now was a tactical retreat. He rehearsed the plan in his head: reach the car, drive straight to the police, or at least get home, lock every door, and set up cameras. But as he neared the parking area, his heart nearly stopped. The silver sedan was still there, and the back window of his car, smashed. Shards of glass glittered on the ground. He froze, heart pounding wildly. The man had gotten there first. He broke into his car. He might be waiting. Ryan didn't go closer. Instead, he steered the kayak into the brush along the shore, quietly slipping into the forest. He held his phone, finally showing a signal bar, and called 911, his voice shaking like he had a fever. "There's someone following me. He might be in my car. Please, I need help." The police told him to stay put. He crouched behind nearby bushes, eyes locked on his vehicle. 1 minute, 5, 10 minutes passed like hours. When the police cruiser finally arrived, Ryan nearly sobbed with relief. 2 officers stepped out. He emerged from the brush, pointing at his car. They opened the rear door, and there was the man, curled up like a predator, waiting for Ryan to return so he could strike. Ryan doesn't remember what he screamed or what he felt when they cuffed the man. He remembers only one thing: the man's eyes as he was led to the cruiser. Still the same as before. Not angry, not deranged, just quiet, waiting. Ryan thought it was over when the police took the man away. He was safe, unharmed, lost nothing but the rear window of his car and a little faith in the peace of nature. But he was wrong. Police said the man wouldn't give his name. No ID. Fingerprints didn't match any database. They kept him for a few days on a temporary hold for property damage, then had to release him. No grounds for further detention. He vanished. And Ryan was now a man living in a box called vigilance. The first week, he didn't dare return to the stream. Still, every morning, he checked the window as soon as he woke up, and checked if the doors were locked tight. One time, he saw muddy footprints on the porch. Faint, but enough to keep him up all night. Another night there was knocking. 3 knocks, not loud, not frantic, just precisely at 3 a.m. He jumped up, grabbed a baseball bat, and opened the front door after peeking through the peephole. No one there, but in the middle of the yard, right under the porch light, was a small stone, neatly placed, etched with 3 words, carved by blade or nail. "Your turn now." Ryan called the police. They checked, installed a camera, but on the nights that followed, nothing happened. Everything felt like an extended game where the player hides, not leaving traces, just leaving the feeling. And that feeling, that's what killed Ryan, day by day. By the 3rd week, he decided to leave town. He booked a flight, planned to move out west where his sister lived. New environment, new people, a place where every gaze would be harmless. On his final night, Ryan stayed up packing late. Around 2 a.m., he sat on his bed, glass of water in hand, staring at the ceiling. And then, instinctively, he turned toward the window. His heart seized. A face, right outside the glass. No doorbell, no knock, no movement. Just standing there, staring at him. So close he could see the breath fogging up the glass. Ryan didn't move. The glass slipped from his hand. His eyes locked on the figure. But in the next second, when he rushed to the window, the face was gone. Police came, searched again, and found nothing. But Ryan knew. The man had never left. And the worst part wasn't being watched. It was knowing. You're never truly alone. Ryan left town the very next morning. He didn't tell anyone, didn't say goodbye to his co-workers, just left the keys in the mailbox and sent a single message to the landlord. "Thank you for everything. I need to go." The flight took him to Portland, where his sister had a small, quiet, sunlit room waiting. They say this city is a haven for dreamers, artists, poets, and people who like to be alone. Ryan hoped to disappear into that crowd, just another shadow in a strange world. He started over, morning walks, coffee from the corner shop, learning to work remotely. Everything slowly fell into place. No more knocking in the night. No more eyes behind the glass. Time passed, and it seemed the man had truly vanished. Until one afternoon, while Ryan was waiting in line at a local bookstore, he happened to glance at the security camera mounted near the ceiling. A black and white monitor displayed 4 angles of the store. In the lower left corner, where a chair sat near the front window, was a man, wearing a denim shirt, shoulder-length hair. Ryan spun around. The chair was empty. He stepped onto the sidewalk, eyes scanning the street. No one. When he returned, the bookseller asked, "Something wrong?" Ryan forced a weak smile. "No, nothing at all." He told himself it might have been a mistake, a trick of the eye, maybe just someone who looked like him. But that night, back home, he checked every lock, drew every curtain, and before bed, he placed a small mirror across from his bedroom window, not to look at himself, but to be sure. If someone stood out there again, this time, he'd see them first. It was the annual camping trip of 3 close friends, Mark, Luke, and Jordan. They had kept the tradition going since high school, each summer, a new destination. That year, they chose West Glacier, Montana, a pristine wilderness over an hour's drive from the nearest town. They arrived on a lightly sunny Friday morning. The first day passed peacefully, setting up camp, fishing, and taking photos for Luke's semi-professional photography portfolio. As night fell, they lit a campfire, grilled sausages, and shared stories. Everything was so ordinary that it bordered on boring. Until the second night. Around 11 p.m., just as the fire had dwindled, the three retreated to their tents. Jordan, always the last to fall asleep, lay staring at the tent ceiling, listening to the insects and the rustling of the forest wind. But then, beneath the natural sounds came something else, a whisper, distant, faint. "Hello," a woman's voice, weak, but not the wind. Jordan shot upright. "Did you hear that?" he shouted toward Luke's tent. "Heard it," Luke replied, his voice low and tense. "Someone's out there." All three scrambled from their tents, standing close together, scanning the darkness. Flashlights cut through the trees. Nothing. But the voice came again, closer now, clearer. "Hello?" This time, the voice was right at the edge of their campsite, and Jordan realized it wasn't the voice of an old woman, as they had first assumed. It was a man, deliberately mimicking a female voice. Forced, unnatural, as if someone was mocking their fear. Then suddenly, Jordan's tent was yanked violently. Something was shaking it with wild force, as if trying to tear it down. "Get out!" Mark screamed. Immediately, footsteps rang out, circling the camp. And then, silence. Not a rustling leaf, not a breath. Just three survivors in the woods, holding their breath, waiting for something they couldn't name. None of the three friends slept that night. After the footsteps faded, they huddled together in the middle of the campsite, backs pressed against each other, each clutching a smoldering stick or a small camping knife. No one spoke. No one laughed. Only the ticking of their inner clocks counted down each second in silence. Jordan trembled, not from the cold, but from the way his tent had been yanked, as if a madman had tried to drag him out from his shelter. There was no way this was just a prank. They didn't dare leave in the middle of the night. The forest path was dangerous, and their car was over 2 kilometers from the camp. After a brief, tense discussion, they all decided to stay in one tent, taking turns standing watch until morning. Mark took the first shift. The other two curled up in sleeping bags, eyes wide open. But exhaustion soon swallowed them. By the time it was Luke's turn to keep watch, dawn was already breaking. When the sun rose, it felt like they were waking from a nightmare. They said nothing, just quietly packed up their gear. Though none of them were hurt and nothing was stolen, they all carried the same heavy feeling that they had just escaped something more dangerous than any wild animal. On the way home, Luke checked his camera. He always reviewed his photos after every trip. The first images were as expected: landscapes, sunsets, Mark holding a fish, Jordan tending the fire. But as he scrolled to the end of the memory card, he froze. There were 3 photos that no one remembered taking. The first, an overhead shot of the camp. Firelight glowed faintly between the trees, all 3 tents clearly visible. None of them had ever left the campsite to get that angle. The second, a close-up of Jordan's tent. From the outside, the camera pointed directly at the slightly unzipped entrance, taken by someone standing just outside, trying to peer in. The third, inside the tent. The dim light captured the 3 of them sleeping, huddled close. The photo was taken from the left corner, meaning the photographer had been inside the tent at night with them. Luke said nothing. He simply handed the camera to Mark and Jordan. When they saw the photos, both froze. None of them remembered unzipping the tent. None had noticed anyone come in. And the worst part, all 3 photos had been taken after the footsteps stopped, which meant that while they thought they were safe, someone was still at the camp and had been very, very close. The 3 of them sat silently in the car, the roar of the engine like background noise drowning out the storm of panic still swirling inside. Jordan stared out the window, arms wrapped around his head, lips pressed so tight they'd turned pale. Mark held the steering wheel, but his eyes stared blankly ahead, hollow, as if he'd lost something greater than reason itself. Luke still had the camera on his lap. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through each photo, as if trying to peel away each layer of darkness clinging to their memories of the night before. "Someone got into the tent," Jordan said, voice choked. "The moment we thought we were safest, that's when it was closest." "No," Luke whispered. "Not someone, something. It wasn't human." Mark slammed the brakes. The car skidded slightly on the winding forest dirt road. All three fell silent. In that moment, the woods swallowed all sound again. No birdsong, no wind. Just the sharp idle of the engine, like it had shattered some quiet ritual still unfolding unseen. He didn't take anything," Mark said, eyes bloodshot. "Didn't steal, didn't hurt us. Just stood there, taking pictures. Why?" Luke took a deep breath, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out an old map. "Last night, when we set up camp, remember that round mound of dirt? I thought it was just a hill. But when I looked at the photos again," he handed his phone to his friends. "The photo was taken at dusk, when Mark was pitching the tent. In the frame, just a few meters from camp, there was a pile of stones stacked atop one another, covered in moss and dead leaves, looking almost like an altar." "What do you think?" Jordan swallowed hard. "Not a homeless guy," Luke said. "Not a hunter. Not a prank." Mark slowly nodded. "Then what?" Luke stared out at the forest, his eyes no longer ordinary. "A ritual, a warning, or maybe just a game. But we're not the ones playing it. We're the target." All three looked again at the final photo, the one taken inside the tent. In the shot, behind the three sleeping bodies in the far shadow near the tent wall, there was a faint blur. If you zoomed in, you could just make out part of a hand, unnaturally long, fingers thin like dry twigs. And beneath the darkness, a pair of eyes, not reflecting light, not human eyes. Eyes of something that had never known the sun. None of the three ever returned to West Glacier. That trip marked the end of their 7-year camping tradition. They never spoke of it again, never shared the story, never told anyone. They deleted all the photos from the camera, but Luke kept one. The one taken inside the tent. The photo wasn't sharp, but every time he looked at it, he was drawn into the shadowed area in the back, where a faint figure lingered, and eyes that never reflected light. Eyes that only revealed themselves if he stared long enough, as if they were waiting for him to notice. 2 months later, Jordan moved. He relocated to a modern apartment complex, one with 24/7 security and hallways that stayed brightly lit through the night. But every night before bed, he would pull the curtains tight and place a chair against the door, a habit he could never quite explain. Mark gave up photography, though once the kind of person who documented everything. Now his phone held no pictures at all, just the default wallpaper. When asked, he simply said, "I don't want to keep anything, if that thing can look back at me." Luke was the only one who dared to study the photo one last time. He zoomed in on every corner, adjusted every shadow. In the third frame, buried in the darkness, he found something he'd missed before, a faint scratch on the tent fabric near where the eyes had been, as if someone's fingernail had lightly scraped across it. No one was hurt, no one disappeared, but something from that night had followed them. Not a killer, not a ghost, just a presence, thin as breath, deep as the old woods. And it knew. They had seen it. You've just listened to 3 true stories, 3 summers no one would ever want to repeat. A man who slipped into a house while everyone slept. A stranger waiting in your car, the place you thought was safe. And a voice in the woods, not calling for help, but luring you closer. If you're still listening, it means you're brave enough. Or maybe you felt something like this before. Drop a comment below. Which story gave you the worst chills? Or share your own strange experience. Who knows? It might show up in the next video. If this video sent a shiver down your spine, hit like, so the algorithm knows you're not afraid of the dark. And don't forget to subscribe, because the nights to come will be deeper, darker, and more real. See you in the next nightmare. But next time, double check your window before you go to sleep.